They called me an outdated granny and kicked me out the same day I finished training my replacement. I didn't cry. I didn't beg. I just smiled because they had no idea they'd handed me the very weapon that would destroy them. They thought they'd won. But the real game, it was only just beginning. They called me an outdated granny and kicked me out the same day I finished training my replacement. I didn't cry. I didn't beg. I just smiled because they had no idea they'd handed me the very weapon that would destroy them. They thought they'd won. But the real game, it was only just beginning. My name is Linda Moore. I'm 61 years old, and for the past 7 years, I worked as the Senior Project Coordinator at Brightline Group, a mid-sized architecture and development firm in Chicago. I wasn't flashy or loud, I just made sure things got done. Permits approved. Contractors paid. Deadlines met. My job was to keep chaos out and progress in. I did it well. Too well, apparently. That morning I just handed Emily Tran, our bright-eyed 25-year-old intern, a certificate I designed myself, marking the completion of her 4-month training. She smiled, hugged me, and chirped, "I learned so much from you, Linda." I felt proud. She was young, eager, and surprisingly sharp. I'd spent long nights showing her the ropes, how to navigate city bureaucracy, who to call when permits stalled, which inspectors you could joke with and which you couldn't. 10 minutes later, I was called into Derek Callahan's office. I should have known. He never called me in unless something was wrong. Derek leaned back in his leather chair, cleared his throat like he was about to announce a weather report, and said, "We're implementing some strategic budget cuts and unfortunately, your position has been eliminated." Then, as if that wasn't enough of a punch to the gut, he added with a smirk, "Thanks for everything, Granny." Granny. That word echoed in my ears like a slap. I sat there in silence, still holding the folder with Emily's certificate inside. Derek continued talking. HR had my severance ready, 2 weeks' pay I could clear out by noon, and security would help me pack up. I didn't hear much after that. Security? As if I'd steal staplers or sabotage drawings. After 7 years of loyal service? I stood up slowly, careful not to let him see my hands shaking. "Thank you for the opportunity," I said, with all the dignity I could muster. I didn't give him the satisfaction of seeing me break. I walked out of that office with my back straight and my silence louder than any outburst could have been. Emily was waiting near reception. She tried to look surprised, even sad. But I saw the flicker in her eyes. She'd known. She wasn't just replacing me. She was recruited to replace me. That stung. But not as much as realizing I had given her everything. My knowledge, my contacts, my time. And now she'd used that to fill my chair. Still, I didn't lash out. I didn't scream. Instead, I went home, placed my small box of personal items in the trunk of my car, and made myself a cup of tea. As the bitterness steeped, so did something else, clarity. They thought I was just an old woman clinging to a job. What they forgot was that I wasn't just an employee. I was the backbone of their biggest project yet. A $35 million development deal that couldn't move forward without my signature. And the best part? They didn't even know it. That evening, I opened my laptop and clicked on a folder I'd maintained for years, Riverside Project. Dozens of files blinked back at me. Zoning documents, compliance forms, contractor lists, environmental reports. I had organized every moving part of that development with the kind of precision that only comes from 30 years in the industry. But what Derek and Emily didn't know, or maybe never bothered to learn, was that every permit for Riverside had been submitted under my consulting company, More Regulatory Solutions, LLC. 3 years ago, the city of Chicago came to me with a problem. Their planning office was overwhelmed. Approvals for large-scale projects were backlogged for months, and developers were furious. So I proposed a solution. I'd act as a liaison, reviewing and submitting all permit paperwork through my firm to ensure compliance before it ever hit a city desk. It worked. The city caught up, developers were happy, and I made extra income on the side. Everyone won. Brightline knew about this from the beginning. In fact, it was why Derek had recruited me during the housing crash. "We need someone who knows how to grease the wheels," he'd said back then. "You have the relationships. You know the system." So I gave him everything. I made his firm relevant again. And now, without me, those permits were just paper. My digital signature was required for final approval. Without it, the Riverside project would stall indefinitely. I could have signed off out of professionalism. Could have let it go. But then I remembered the smirk on Derek's face when he said, "Thanks, Granny." No, they needed to feel this. The next morning I met Vanessa Grant, an old friend who happened to be an employment lawyer. We sat in a quiet cafe while I explained everything: my firing, the LLC, the permits. She listened carefully, then leaned back and smiled. "Legally? You're in the clear. They can't compel you to finalize those permits without compensation." I nodded. "I'm not looking for revenge. Just respect. And maybe a little justice." Vanessa grinned. "Then here's what we'll do. Draft a letter stating that More Regulatory Solutions is willing to complete the permit process for Riverside for a consulting fee of $75,000, equivalent to 9 months' salary, plus formal credit as the compliance specialist." I agreed. It was fair. More than fair, actually, considering they were the ones who tried to cut me loose like expired office equipment. By Monday morning, my inbox was on fire. Missed calls, desperate emails, voicemails from Brightline's junior project managers. Apparently, the city had rejected their request to bypass my signature. Then came the voice I'd been waiting for. "Linda, look, I think there's been a misunderstanding," Derek said in his message. "Let's talk about the Riverside permits. Please call me back." Too late. At noon, Vanessa sent the official letter. An hour later, I received an unexpected call from Jonathan West, the lead investor in the Riverside project. A powerful real estate magnate with zero tolerance for mistakes. "Miss Moore," he said, his voice calm but cold, "I hear you're the only reason this project isn't dead in the water." I smiled and replied, "Yes, Mr. West. That's correct." He paused, then said, "Let's meet. Tomorrow morning. My office. I want to hear your side before I make a decision Brightline won't like." As I hung up, I leaned back in my chair. The real game had just changed, and this time I was holding all the cards. Tuesday morning, I dressed like a woman with leverage. A navy blue suit I'd once worn to a city council presentation. Subtle, elegant, sharp. The kind of outfit that said, "I may be 61, but I'm not done yet." I arrived at West Development Group headquarters 15 minutes early. The receptionist greeted me politely and escorted me to a sleek glass conference room overlooking the Chicago River. The irony wasn't lost on me. This was the very riverfront the Riverside project was supposed to transform. At exactly 9 a.m., Jonathan West entered. He was tall, silver-haired, mid-50s, with a kind of presence that filled a room. No handshake was limp, no word wasted. "Miss Moore," he said, extending his hand. "Thanks for coming." "Of course. And please call me Linda." We sat. Coffee was poured. Then, without preamble, he spoke. "I've invested $12 million into Riverside," he said. "And now I find out Brightline has fired the only person who can navigate the permit process. They're telling me it's a paperwork issue. That you're being difficult." I held his gaze. "They're not wrong. I am being difficult. But only because they were reckless." He tilted his head, listening. I opened my laptop and turned it toward him. "Here are the documents. Every permit filed under my company's name. Every approval routed through the expedited system I helped the city create. The system Brightline relied on, because they didn't understand the red tape. I did." He scrolled through the files, silent for a few minutes. "Why more regulatory?" he asked finally. 3 years ago, the city asked me to formalize a consulting arm to help reduce permit backlog. I agreed. It's fully registered, fully compliant, and separate from my employment at Brightline. They knew that, but they thought replacing me with a younger face meant they didn't need the experience anymore. He leaned back. "And now they're discovering that youth doesn't come with shortcuts." "Exactly." He nodded slowly. "I saw the letter from your lawyer. 75,000. Plus project credit." "Yes. It's what I would have earned in 9 months. And frankly, it's a bargain considering the alternative." "What is the alternative?" "They resubmit everything through standard channels. Lose months. Possibly their spot in line. And probably you." He smiled faintly at that. "You've clearly thought this through." I said nothing. I didn't need to. Jonathan tapped the table thoughtfully, then looked up. How would you feel about bypassing Brightline entirely? I blinked. I'm listening. I want more regulatory to report directly to me for the remainder of the Riverside project. Same fee, but with performance bonuses if we hit milestones early. You'd work with my in-house development team. No Derek. No Emily. Just results. I tried to remain composed, but inside I felt like dancing. And Brightline? I asked. He smirked. That's between me and them. But I'm reconsidering the relationship. Bad judgment is expensive. Yours, however, seems quite profitable. I left with a handshake agreement and instructions to forward the contract to my attorney for review. As I walked out of the building, my phone buzzed. A text from Derek. Emergency meeting today at 3 p.m. Riverside. Your presence requested. We'll pay consultation fee. I stared at it for a moment, then laughed out loud. Too late, Derek. Much too late. By the time I arrived home from my meeting with Jonathan West, the entire energy around the Riverside project had shifted, and Brightline could feel it. There was an elaborate flower arrangement waiting on my porch. Dozens of pink lilies, white roses, and a card that read, "So sorry for the misunderstanding. Please call Derek ASAP. We need you. Emily." Misunderstanding? They fired me, humiliated me, replaced me with someone half my age, and now that their golden project was crashing, they wanted to call it a misunderstanding? I picked up the flowers, walked across the street, and left them on Mrs. Lopez's porch. She was 84, loved fresh blooms, and deserved something beautiful far more than I did that day. Then I poured myself a cup of tea, sat down at my kitchen table, and opened my laptop. There it was, an email from Emily herself. Subject line: Please help. The body of the message was equal parts pleading and condescending. Linda, I know you must be upset about the restructuring, but delaying the Riverside project only damages your professional reputation. Please be reasonable and sign off on the permits. I'd be happy to include your name in the acknowledgements. Acknowledgements. After 7 years of service, that was her offer. A footnote in someone else's success. I deleted the email without responding. Instead, I called Vanessa, my lawyer, and gave her the details of my handshake agreement with Jonathan West. She whistled when she heard it. Direct contract with Warren Development? Performance bonuses too? That's huge, Linda. I smiled. Cutting Brightline out entirely. Any mention of how he plans to handle them? He said Derek has some explaining to do. I bet, she laughed. Forward me the agreement as soon as it lands. That night I planted the seedlings I'd bought the weekend before. Basil, tomatoes, and a few rows of snap peas. I dug into the soil with quiet satisfaction, knowing something new was growing, both in my garden and in my career. By Wednesday morning, the whispers had become roars. My phone buzzed constantly. Former colleagues, city officials, even journalists. Everyone wanted to know, was Brightline really out? Was I really running Riverside? Then came the message I'd been expecting. We're prepared to offer you double the consulting fee you requested. Please call me. This could ruin us. Derek. It was the most desperate voicemail yet. His voice shook. His tone begged. He offered everything except an apology. But it didn't matter. The deal was already in motion, and so was the fallout. At noon, Vanessa called. Contract's in. I reviewed it. It's better than we hoped. How so? For starters, it's not just Riverside. Warren wants more regulatory retained for all of his developments in Chicago over the next 2 years. 6-figure income, milestone bonuses, and full autonomy. And get this. I leaned in. The contract gives Warren the right to choose or reject any architectural partner for his projects. Brightline has no guaranteed future with him. I let that settle in. My former employer had gambled with arrogance and lost their seat at the table. I'll sign it this afternoon, I said. Congratulations, Linda, Vanessa replied. They tried to write you off. Now you're writing the next chapter. And I was. Not as a victim, but as a force they never saw coming. By Thursday morning, Brightline's slow collapse was no longer behind closed doors. It was unfolding in real time, across inboxes, meetings, and even newsrooms. The first call came from Harold Lynn, the senior officer at the city's planning department. He'd worked with me for over 20 years. His tone was a blend of amusement and exasperation. Linda, you won't believe what Trent's trying to pull. Trent, as in Derek Callahan, who once smugly called me Granny before escorting me out with security. He's calling every hour, Harold said, trying to convince us to change our permitting procedures. He literally used the phrase dinosaur process. Said we need to modernize and move past outdated bottlenecks. I laughed. Let me guess. He means the process I created. Exactly. And the planning director reminded him that those so-called dinosaurs are what keep the city compliant and projects on track. Then he asked if Brightline was officially rejecting the expedited process your consultancy established. And what did Derek say? He backpedaled so fast I could hear his shoes squeaking. I leaned back, the satisfaction sweet and slow. Thanks for the update, Harold. Later that afternoon, I met with Jonathan West and his project team in Warren Development's conference room. He walked in holding a red folder. I've decided, he said without ceremony, to terminate Brightline's contract for Riverside. The room froze. Effective immediately, he added, placing the folder on the table. Their mishandling of the permit process shows a level of negligence I can't afford. Not on a $35 million development. I blinked. What about the architectural plans they've already completed? We own them, Jonathan replied. It's in our agreement. We've already reached out to Harrison and Cole, Brightline's largest competitor. They've agreed to take over and honor the original designs with minor adjustments. Harrison and Cole. That was a twist. Brightline had once poached clients from them. Now the tables had turned. Jonathan turned to me and smiled. Linda, let's talk about how to move forward. With your expertise, I believe we can regain the lost time, and then some. As we dove into timelines and logistics, I felt something I hadn't felt in months. Relevance. Not just as a checkbox on someone's staff directory, but as a leader, someone with experience that couldn't be copied, replaced, or digitized. That night, I received an alert on my phone. Breaking. Warren Development drops Brightline from Riverside project. The article, published in the Chicago Business Journal, detailed how my firm, More Regulatory Solutions, had been brought in as the lead compliance consultant. There was even a quote from Jonathan. In urban development, experience and trust matter. We've brought in the best regulatory expert in the city to get this project back on track. For the city, the investors, and the community. There was a picture to me, standing at the city's permit office, smiling as I submitted the final approval. I printed out the article and tucked it next to the termination notice Brightline gave me just 10 days earlier. The contrast couldn't have been sharper. From budget cut granny to headline consultant. My daughter Rachel called a few minutes later. Mom, you're trending on LinkedIn. And you're on the front page. Do you realize how big this is? I smiled into the phone. It's just business. No, she said, laughing. It's karma. I paused. Not karma, honey. Just consequences. And Derek Callahan? He hadn't seen anything yet. By Friday, the ripple effects of Brightline's fall were spreading across Chicago's development world like wildfire. It wasn't just Riverside they'd lost. The phones at Brightline weren't ringing with new business. They were ringing with cancellations. Word had gotten out. The firm that fired its regulatory backbone had lost its grip on the city's permit process. Rachel called again that morning. She'd been getting updates faster than I could. Mom, she said, barely able to contain herself. I just heard through a colleague that 2 more clients pulled out of Brightline. One of them was a commercial housing deal in Bronzeville. I leaned back in my chair holding my coffee. That was supposed to be their Q3 anchor project. Not anymore. Apparently, the client said they didn't trust Brightline to get approvals done in time. And Jenna? I raised an eyebrow. What about Emily? Rachel chuckled. She's been reassigned to the social media team. Apparently, she couldn't figure out how to file a basic zoning variance, and got caught giving the wrong specs to the city. That part made me smile. It wasn't bitterness, it was irony. She had the followers, the filters, and the hashtags, but no clue how the system worked. And now, she was exactly where she belonged, crafting captions, not city plans. Meanwhile, my email inbox was exploding. Developers, consultants, even law firms wanted to set up meetings. People who had never taken me seriously before were now asking for advice, proposals, partnerships. What did they see? Not a granny. Not a relic. They saw the woman who stopped a $35 million project in its tracks, and then brought it back to life without missing a beat. By noon, I was in the Warren Development Conference Room again, this time helping finalize the revised Riverside timeline. Jonathan West introduced me to his full executive team. "This," he said proudly, "is the reason we're still on schedule. Linda isn't just our consultant. She's our shield, our translator, and our compass through Chicago's regulatory jungle." It felt surreal. A week ago, I was being escorted out of Brightline with a cardboard box. Now I was being celebrated as the key to saving one of the city's most ambitious developments. By the following week, things escalated even further. Vanessa called with updates. Warren's legal team just finalized the long-term deal. 2 years. All his projects. And get this, he wants you to head up a new division. City Liaison and Compliance Strategy. I blinked. You're kidding. Nope. He's offering to expand more regulatory into a full-service compliance firm, with you as managing director. He even proposed seed funding if you want to grow the team. I couldn't speak for a moment. It was overwhelming in the best way. "I think it's time to scale up," I finally said. By Friday, I'd already interviewed 2 former colleagues in their 50s, women who'd been sidelined by companies chasing youth and image over knowledge and skill. They reminded me of myself just before I was shown the door. Only now I was the one opening the door for them. And as for Brightline, they were scrambling. Derek had sent one final offer. A full reinstatement, back pay, and a promise to rebuild our relationship. I didn't even reply. The truth was I didn't want my old job back. I had built something better. Something mine. And it was just getting started. 3 months later, I stood beneath a white ceremonial tent as golden shovels broke the first patch of dirt on the Riverside project site. Flashbulbs popped. City officials, investors, and media crowded in. My name was printed boldly on the official program. Linda Moore, Lead Regulatory Consultant, Warren Development. The very same ground where Brightline had once thought they'd build their legacy was now the beginning of mine. Jonathan West stood beside me, smiling for the cameras. "Let's get one with just you and the team," the photographer said, motioning for a few of us to step forward. That's when I saw him, Derek Callahan, lingering awkwardly near the crowd's edge, a forced smile tugging at his lips. His once perfect hair was thinner, his posture less confident. And beside him, no Emily in sight. Our eyes met for a split second. He looked away first. That moment was enough. After the ceremony, a reporter from the Chicago Tribune approached me. "Ms. Moore, could we get a quote for our feature piece? The city's calling you the permit whisperer." I chuckled. Let's just say I know the system, and the people inside it. The next morning, that quote appeared front and center in the Sunday business section, alongside a headline that read, "From Fire to Front Page. How Linda Moore Became Chicago's Most Sought-After Consultant." There was even a photo me, holding a rolled-up site plan with the Riverside render behind me. Below that, a quote from Harold Lynn at City Planning. "Linda knows more about Chicago zoning than anyone in the industry. Working with her cuts project timelines in half." My phone didn't stop buzzing for days. New clients, interview requests, even universities asking me to guest lecture. But my favorite calls came from older professionals, especially women, who said my story gave them hope. One message in particular stuck with me. They pushed me out last year. Said I was too slow. Now they're 6 months behind schedule. Your story reminded me that we're not obsolete, we're undervalued. Thank you. And that's when it hit me. This wasn't just a comeback story. It was a correction. A reminder that deep experience, quiet resilience, and long-earned wisdom aren't things you can replace with trendy titles and Instagram followers. I expanded my team, hiring 2 more consultants, all over 50. Women who had been passed over, dismissed, or restructured. Together we built something Brightline never could. A consultancy rooted in real-world knowledge, earned respect and trust. As for Brightline, without access to my expedited permit channels, their projects stalled. Clients left. Reputation crumbled. Derek was replaced within the year, and Emily? I heard she pivoted to marketing, working on TikTok campaigns for mid-tier developers. I didn't feel angry. Just finished. The door they slammed on me had led straight into a better one. one they never had the key to open. On the first spring morning of the next year, I walked past the Riverside site. Construction was in full swing. Cranes moved, workers shouted. Progress bloomed like my backyard basil. I paused, taking it all in. At 61, they called me a granny. At 62, they now called me the best in the business. And I didn't need revenge. I just needed the truth to catch up. And it finally had.